Hi, I'm Max Porterfield, President and CEO of Callinex Mines. We're a junior exploration company based in Canada with a keen focus in northern Manitoba and the Flin Flon greenstone belt, where we have two emerging discoveries, both the Rainbow and Alchemist discovery, that are emerging. One was made in 2020, and then one more recently was announced just a couple weeks ago here in 2022. They have an immediate potential impact on the community of Flin Flon, which has a 100-year production history that we're all very passionate about continuing.
Well, yeah, and I've said the 777 mine has closed down now. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, it closed down in May of this year.
Right. So what you're doing is quite important to the district. I want to catch up with you. So we had a sort of technical session. You came on the platform and had a little technical session with one of our geos. Really good session. He came off quite excited about what you were doing, but he would have been even more excited if you'd given them news, which has happened since then, has made a discovery, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We had been leading into that. We had, I think, probably 6 holes into what is now the Alchemist area that were pending assays. So the results of those assays were very exciting. We're on to a new discovery, a new deposit, and where it sits is, very, very exciting because these deposits sit along growth faults and they occur in clusters. And when you look into the town of Flin Flon, you've got a growth fault there that sits north-south facing, but within that growth fault corridor, you have 3 main deposits. You have the original Flin Flon ore body that sits within 400 meters of the base of the growth fault, known as Mill Rock Hill. And then as you get more distal or further away, you have the Callinex 777. So collectively, within the first 2 kilometers of the growth faults in Flin Flon, you have 100 million tons of high grade. So at Pine Bay, where we've been focused for since 2014, and previous explorers explored the area based upon the pedigree of the geology, no one had actually looked within the first 2 kilometers of the growth fault at Pine Bay. And really, you have the Rainbow, which sits about 1.7 kilometers away from the base of the growth fault at Pine Bay. We call it Mill Rock Mountain. And then now Alchemist has emerged right at the base, in tens of meters from the base of the growth fault. So aside from being onto a brand new discovery, what that really even opens up even more is to host additional discoveries, potentially between Alchemist and Rainbow. And so we're keenly focused on expanding the discoveries that we do have, and then within that first 2 kilometers of the growth fault. Because after you move outside that first 2 kilometers of the growth fault at Pine Bay, you have a stacking of 6 other deposits, and they get smaller the further away you get from the base of the growth fault. So the fact that we're going proximal leads to potential size, and many more to be found besides the 2 that we've already found in Alchemist and Rainbow. So again, my mentor always said he made discoveries in even years. I kind of shook my head and said, what? We made the Rainbow discovery in 2020, really the height of the pandemic, and now to be making the new discoveries in 2022. I really like to have twin boys this year. I like to say in terms of Alchemist, more of a boy name. Odin's more of a boy name, and Rainbow is a little bit more feminine. So a very, very exciting year ahead of us.
It sounds like, and just tell me, I'm interested in how you're understanding what you've got there. You talk about the growth fault, but in terms of those lenses, sometimes overlapping, and I say, getting smaller the further away they get, are you starting to understand what the indicators are to allow you to better target your drilling going forward in terms of finding these new lenses?
Well, certainly, all the support is there. So in terms of the discovery of Alchemist, the discovery of Alchemist is a little bit different than the discovery of Rainbow, where we really kind of made our name for ourselves as implementing IP, charged by isoshells, and vectoring at Pine Bay, which is not a tool that was used in the Flin Flon Greenstone Belt. With Alchemist, it was very much theory-driven. And again, you had to test your theory with the drill bit and different surveys. In terms of the discovery of alcohol, we were drilling based upon a geologic theory that deposits should sit at the base of the growth faults, and now we're expanding that theory utilizing all the different tools. So in terms of the tools that are very supportive is obviously geology is guiding us, and then when we're not relying on borehole electromagnetics or some kind of geophysical tool, we're heavily relying on geochem. And the geology and the geochem data are very, very similar to the geology and the geochem that you see at Rainbow. Of course, you get high-grade mineralization at depth on Alchemist as well, but these patterns are picking up within these systems, and each one of these can host a large VMS deposit as we get into them, right? So again, the deep discoveries or the big discoveries in the Flin Flon camp go at depth and continue at depth, and that's where you build tonnage. And what we're looking to do is find multiple new discoveries along that growth fault corridor and build tonnage on multiple systems at once, which is what we're seeing with Rainbow being the first of which. And then as we were working on Rainbow, you could see us behind the scenes quietly starting to move one of the rigs off to the west in Q4 of last year, which led us up to announcing the new target area, the theory and the thesis for what we're believed to be there and why. And then now we've raised the capital and we've drilled that and hit Rainbow. I mean, an Alchemist came from that.
Right, and yes, you're referring to the capital you raised back in March. Was it just over $4 million, right? So you, exactly. Super high grades. You keep announcing these really high grades over decent widths and thicknesses. Quite frankly, these lenses as well. But in terms of allowing people like me to paint a picture of the potential scale of this thing, so, how many millions of tons could this become? You're going to need to kind of piece these components together, but you're doing it in your own time. You're, I guess, plowing your own furrow, and you are doing it your way. I would hazard to say. So, what is your view about how you do kind of manage your money as a custodian of the capital, how you allocate your capital, how quickly you drill, where you drill, to be able to kind of get to a point in time which you've got to guide us on, say, what, I can now show you, I can now demonstrate this thing has the scale, not just the grade but the scale, because that's the important component here eventually for you.
Well, you've got to do that in steps. If you look at the history in Flin Flon, most of the mines started around 3-4 million tons. And so that was the first things first, is we want to drill out, back of the envelope to get to kind of instantly that size, particularly with Rainbow. And so when we went to go raise capital this year, we raised enough capital to fund a 20,000 meter drilling campaign. 20,000 meters is obviously a substantial campaign. 10,000 meters of that was allocated and earmarked for Rainbow. And that's just continuous, resource growth on a per capita basis. This is how you're going to drive your share price performance. And we know that we need to march towards a maiden resource on Rainbow to show the world what Rainbow is within the first 800 meters of surface, and again, open at depth. And then we budgeted the last or final 10,000 meters. Concurrently, we're drilling both at the same time, but the 10,000 meters earmarked was for exploration. And so that was really focused on making new discoveries to kickstart a brand new Rainbow, which is where Alchemist is. Now, as we move forward, I like to say it's called the 90-10 rule. We'll spend 90% of the capital moving forward in terms of driving towards resource growth on the discoveries that we have, and then always earmark 10 to 20% of the budget on testing targets, because you've got to test the targets that you delineate and create to make new discoveries. There was a lot of questions that we might have received from feedback from investors last year going, well, that seems like you're wildcatting. But it's really not wildcatting. This is how a discovery is born. You get the data that you allowed, you compile that, you have a thesis, and you go out and test your thesis. It's not blindly just drilling a hole in the ground. You're doing that for a purpose, and you're trying to gain information from that. So in terms of managing and moving forward, again, I would imagine 80 to 90% of the capital that we're going to be driving forward is going to go to immediate resource growth and continue at Rainbow, Alchemist, and then potentially Odin, which is the target area that we're currently testing between Alchemist and Rainbow, but always keeping in mind in terms of what's next. If you go back and look at Callinex in 2020, late 2020, coming into 2021, we announced Rainbow, but what we immediately did after we announced Rainbow is we started doing regional geophysical tools, which then built a deeper pipeline for exploration moving forward, which we're starting to test in 2022, and you're seeing the bear fruit. So again, these are long lead items to create discoveries. We don't want to waste capital. We want to put the capital where it is, but you've got to put the hole in the ground, and sooner rather than later, and we're pretty good at doing that.
Right, okay. You're at Beaver Creek right now. You've got a lot of meetings lined up, you told me just before we went on air, as it were. So people are obviously interested in this story. I've spoken to companies who've got 5 meetings set up. You have 40. So I think people are interested in what you've got to say. But you've got copper, you've got gold, you've got silver, you've got zinc. Predominantly high-grade copper, I suspect, is what people are after, or is it? You can tell me. But why are people lining up to talk to you? Because again, you are a $35-40 million company at the moment. What are you doing that is attracting them?
We have huge upside. Aside from high grades, we've got the potential to have something spectacularly huge. I mean, I would never have dreamed in 100 years, as they would say, literally it's been 100 years of exploration at Pine Bay, that no one would have done any exploration in proximity to that base of that growth fault. And when you look, 100 million tons of high grade potential really is what you see at Flin Flon, and having that type of potential in the largest felsic volcanic in a system that a lot of really established geologists have always earmarked, this has got to be where some whales sit, so to speak, is quite unique. And so we stand out because we're in a tier 1 jurisdiction. There's a lot of operational risk going around globally. We have high grades. We've got proximity infrastructure. We check back the ESG in terms of what we're looking to do for the community, hydroelectric power, and now we have numerous emerging discoveries that are not only high grade, but they have high grade with potential for big scale and immediate impact, where we can go into production much more quickly because we're located. So we're starting to check a lot of boxes that you inherently just can't check off. So we're quite excited about, the long-term game plan is coming together just at the right time for us.
So what's the tipping point for you? Because I think, you're really tight share structure. You don't raise a lot of money. You don't have a lot of shares out, but the ones that you have seem to be in good hands. So how do you kind of create a tipping point? Because would you argue that perhaps there is a more promotional way that maybe you could do a little bit more of, or would you say that you're so comfortable to kind of focus on fundamentals? Because there are companies that haven't got half of what you've got, which, maybe 3-4 times your market cap. So who's right? Who's right?
Well, I know who's right. I know what we have in the company, and I know what the valuation for the assets are. So I know that I'm right. It just takes a little bit longer when you're so early into something for other people to realize that you're right. I like into the art market because I collect a lot of artwork. And oftentimes we'll see something, when I'm talking to other collectors, and there'll be a piece of artwork that doesn't seem like it's priced right, and a lot of people instantly walk away because they're like, well, this doesn't make any sense. And that inherently is, I think, what we're trying to face. We're at the tipping point right now where just a couple more holes, whether it be into Alchemist moving forward or a new discovery, again, will add to that, where it instantly goes at scale, and then you're going to have that. And I think, us being a tight structure might have, you could argue, hurt us in the shorter period, but longer term, having a really tight structure is going to be very, very unique. And at the end of the day, whether it's, a tipping point being another hole into the ground, a strike that can affect supply that will send the market into a kind of flurry that people realize, well, holy, there's something missing here, and or a validation by a third-party investor or entity to that end, can all be trigger points that can validate the story. And I think right now, people are looking at it and they don't have an ability to see what we see. It's just like we've had one of our first conversations, you and I together. It was actually we had 1 hole or 2 hole in the rainbow, and he asked me, what does this mean? And I said, I believe, and we believe, that this is the next mine, right? And we had that conversation or something along those lines. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the word mine, but we saw the potential there that a lot of people couldn't see. And that's because we know what we're working on intimately. Our team's experts in what we're on to. And so when you see something so far ahead of everybody else, the pain in life is really getting them to come along that train. So we do that different ways, certainly from the marketing perspective. But at the end of the day, we've got to keep plugging at it and getting the work done that's going to drive value. And right now, in terms of a value perspective, the company's never been any more undervalued than it is today. Maybe aside from 2 weeks ago, but we put out some material news that kind of helped that along.
Yeah. It certainly did. You saw an immediate pop there. But so of the people that you're meeting, because you talk about validation, right? And so it's going to take someone big, someone meaningful with a profile to validate what you're doing. I can see this. We're having a conversation. We've had a few good conversations. Our geologists like like what you're doing and the way that you're doing it. It's a good asset, but the market's not giving you credit for that because you're not a promotional company. So what type of person, company, entity do you think it's going to take to validate this, to help get you noticed, to help at least shine a light on what you're doing?
The funny thing is that early in my career I was considered a promotional person. But I guess I've been better at finding mineralization, so that reputation's kind of gone away. With that being said, we need to continue doing what we're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, being approached by some really big majors is a big win. But from our standpoint, again, we want to be in control of the reins of the racehorse that we're racing the race. And so we look for a natural investment on the equity basis, just to kind of set expectations. It wouldn't be on the project level. We're not there yet. Would be a big validation, I think in many ways that they've done their homework. And I think the reason that we've kind of been focusing on trying to, I call them whales in many ways because they're giants in their own right, is that they understand on a technical basis what we're on to. And then more importantly, if they were to make an investment on a Callinex, they would be making an investment on a Callinex because of the potential, not for what's there, but what's to come. Because if you're running a $20+ billion company, you're not looking for a 5-10 million tonner, you're looking for 50-100 million tons that's going to move the needle for you. And how do majors do that? They go out and invest in exploration companies. We know that's been the tried and true. And I think that if we were able to pull something like that off, that'd be big. Additionally, if we were to get any kind of endorsement by the government of Manitoba, would be huge. And we've been dealing with policymakers now for the past couple of years since we've met with on Rainbow. And now that the 777 shut down, job losses are there. That's something else that we're kind of always going to be working on because we're always acting on behalf of the community of Flin Flon alone, aside from our shareholders and ourselves on this journey. But again, any kind of validation from either a major and or some non-traditional group that can really set the standard that this is something that's going to be valuable and viable in the future, potentially, would be a big endorsement for the company and its shareholders. But at the end of the day, that's just an endorsement that's endorsing what's already there and what already can potentially come out of the ground, and nothing more. I mean, people need to understand that, right? Oftentimes, one investor does the work, and then everybody else goes, who's in, assuming that someone else has done the work for them. And it's just like elementary school all over again. The smart kid in the classroom might be the nerdy one, but suddenly becomes the popular one when test time comes around, because everybody wants to pass that test, want to know where the answers are, and the easiest way to do it is to go to someone else instead of doing the work yourself. And the same thing in terms of me managing a company. I brought on certain people earlier on in my career to more or less help me on the journey, but it wasn't until I became ingrained in every minute detail and did the work myself, so to speak, with our team, that the success started happening. So again, we'll get there. And it's just about being patient. We're also dealing with a lot of headwinds, but we don't ever look at the headwinds of the fear-based society that we live in, saying that we can no longer succeed in what we're looking to accomplish because of this or that. And I think that anytime you've spoken to me, no matter the market environment, no matter if there's a war going on, what copper prices might be in the next 5 minutes, it doesn't change our long-term objective, because none of those things change our long-term objective. Because at the end of the day, if you find something of value, that you're creating something of value, the value will be rewarded. And we're just managing the cap table as we go through that process and that journey.
Right. So and talk about managing fear or managing expectations. You've got two other projects. You've got obviously New Brunswick and Newfoundland. Manitoba is clearly the focus, and for a company of your size, with you've got to be very efficient with where you allocate your capital, and you're seeing a lot of success there. But have you been tempted during these sort of strange economic times we're in at the moment to offload, farm out, monetize in any way, shape, or form the New Brunswick or Newfoundland assets?
I mean, potentially. I'm a businessman. So at the end of the day, when you're a businessman, you're looking to do deals to create value. We obviously thought there was a tremendous amount of value when we acquired them at the bottom of the base metal cycle. I mean, if you look at the timing on those assets, it's 2017. No one liked base metals. What often you find is that people like to anchor value on terms of historically what you paid for something, not what the market prevailing value of something is. So with that being said, we will look to monetize them in some way or another if it makes sense in a structure that would make sense to our shareholder base and create the most amount of value for our shareholders. I'm a very large shareholder myself. Our team's very large shareholders. My family's a large shareholder. The extended shareholders are like family to me. They've known me long enough at this point. So certainly if there's some point we will look to create value. But again, as the Callinex brand rises, the value of those assets inherently rise as well with the work that we're doing in Manitoba. So again, We will look at a deal. I mean, a good example of that is we had some claims in northern Manitoba that we divested for $1 million in cash, and that we felt was the right value and what was necessary and was non-core to our business to make that transaction, completed it, and we're happy to move on down the road. Whereas, we paid pennies on the dollar for those assets in Eastern Canada, and we will look to create value much more so than what we paid for them.
Okay, and that's the first day of the conference, so a long ways to go, and I'll be intrigued to hear from you after you've been through it in terms of understanding sort of the mood of people walking into the conference and at the end of it. But what would a successful conference look like for you? What do you want to be able to take away from it?
Well, I mean, a successful conference is always by the interactions you have with people. So again, we have some pretty key meetings with your existing shareholder base. I'd say we're probably meeting with 10 to 15% of our shareholder base, and then the rest are new meetings and or follow-up meetings to those that we're meeting with. And it's oftentimes everybody would question when you go to one conference another. And what great example is, 1 year is the very first year we went to VRIC. It was a really bad market in 2014. We were a $6 million market cap company, and everyone was, why are you spending money to go to VRIC in Vancouver for that conference? And I said, you don't ever know who you're going to meet, and it can change your life, because it only takes one person to change your life. And so we went to that conference, and the investor that came out was RCF, and they're still a shareholder today. So again, I don't really judge conferences and what happens instantly in the conferences, but more or less the relationships that you build and what grows for them after the conference.
Yeah, I think Again, so the conferences are coming back, so it'll be interesting to sort of see, if the investors also return as well.
Here, so yeah, I'm very busy with my team here the next 4 days, so I'm just trying to plan when I'm going to go to sleep. But I know there's certainly investors, they're certainly back, and the market's very emotional. So it's often goes people, how do you make calls on the market? Well, you just talk to a few people. I don't need to talk to a lot of people. But when you're talking to the few people you're talking to, really all from May, June, July, August, the same thing everybody's saying, and it's just like it's self. I forget the term, but it's all created by itself, self-fulfilling. So everybody's like, oh, the market's bad. The market's going to get better in September. Well, if everybody says in their mind the market's going to get in September, well, inherently the market's going to get in September. I mean, the market's driven by psychology. And so immediately you enter a new month. But what really just changed? Nothing changed other than the perception of people's minds. I went into a coffee shop the other day and I saw someone's really down, and I get coffee from the girl. I said, what's wrong? And she's like, oh, I'm having a bad day. You ever have bad days? I said, everybody has bad days. Talked to her for 5 minutes. I said, how do you feel right now? She goes, I feel great. I'm really happy. I said, what changed? Nothing changed other than your mindset, which I was able to change your mindset in a very period of time. But that's the same thing with investors. The market's driven by psychology, and the psychology was saying that September was supposed to be a better month for no other reason than everybody told us September is supposed to be another month. So we'll see how it all goes, but I'm very excited to be back and in Beaver Creek, and we'll see how the conference goes this week. Good.
And just with one last question, which we've had a handful of questions asking pretty much the same question, and I think I know the answer, which is, is the for sale sign going to go up anytime soon?
No. Why would you make a discovery of two very high-grade discoveries at that in their infancy? It'd be like giving your babies up for adoption, and that, to me, is not a good idea. You'd be tearing them out of my hands to do that. Is there a time that your child goes off, gets married, and everything like that? Yeah. But that's not the time to let them free. And again, I really liken this in many ways to the Iotogu discovery. I know it was in Mongolia. I know it was much different grades. It is huge. But that was a story that didn't catch wind. If you look at it, that stock couldn't break $3 for 2.5 years. And then ultimately, Teck came in and validated that discovery with a 9.9 equity standpoint and immediately went to 18 or something close to that if you look back at the stock chart. And I often liken that my experience was very like, and our experience was very like that discovery at Pine Bay in more reason than one. But that's kind of been an experience. If you look at Callinex, we've hit the discoveries, we've hit another discovery, and the stock just doesn't want to seem to break 3 yet. But I do believe that we're going to get some sort of validation at some point or a tipping point, and once we do tip, we're going to have a run, and people are going to start really appreciating more so what's there at Pine Bay and the company overall in general. And between now and then, we'll keep doing what we're going to do and keep telling the story with a lot of enthusiasm and enjoy what we're doing.
Good man. Max, I expect nothing less from you. Look, appreciate your time today. I know you've got a busy 3 days or so. So good luck with that. Let us know how you get on and keep up the good work.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me again.